Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I am honored to have Amy Charlesworth with me. She is former Army, she is a current HR leader, and she also has a podcast that she hosts. And one of the things that I think you're going to hear in her story is sometimes you have to be willing to go against the grain to get to where you're supposed to be going. So, Amy, thanks so much for being on today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah. So to start your journey as a young individual, you started working at 13 years old. So talk a little bit about, getting that work ethic early on and having a job early in life.
Yeah, I used my early days as a working girl as an escape from my home life, which I'm sure lots of people can relate to. After school, I used to go down to a hair salon in Nottingham, England, and sweep up hair and make cups of tea and help make appointments and things like that at a hair salon for, gosh, almost 3 years. And it really set the tone for the rest of my life, just having a job, having purpose, having something to do. It kept me busy in what could have otherwise turned out to be a disastrous situation with a teenage girl running around on the streets. But yeah, it was a really beautiful thing for me to find a home and having a job opportunity after school.
Absolutely. Now, as you were working there, the military happened to be outside, and so this piqued your intrigue. But due to the relationship and the family, that didn't end up working to be in that military, but ended up joining the U.S. military. So, talking a little bit about that story and how it all came to be.
Yeah, so for your listeners, my accent probably throws you off, but because I've got an American accent, but born and raised in Nottingham, England, and my parents split up when I was really young. My mother moved to the United States, my father stayed in the UK, and so downstairs from that hair salon was a British Army recruiting office, and so I used to see them every day on my breaks from work, and hanging out outside on my way in, on my way out, and they would always ask me, hey, what are you doing? Working to try to recruit me. When you graduate from school in England, you graduate when you're 16. So what are you doing when you turn 16 and, join the military? And to me, they were just the most incredible people. They were, in their uniforms, they were handsome, they had confidence. Like it was all the things that I wanted to be myself. And
Mm.
so it was very attracting to me, very impressionable, to see them in their glory. And of course, that made me want to join the military. Whatever they were doing, I wanted to do. And so I did ask my dad, hey, when I finish school, when I graduate, can I join the military? And my dad was like, "Oh my gosh, no daughter of mine is going to be joining the military. Are you out of your mind? You work at a hair salon. What are you going to do in the military?" And so, being a typical stubborn teenager, I definitely was like, I am not taking no for an answer. This is just not going to happen. So that summer, I had, turned 17. My birthday is August. So right at the end of the summer, I turned 17. I flew to the United States and I was visiting my mom and I actually had a return ticket to go back to England. And I looked at that ticket, I looked at my mom, and I was like, "Can I join the military in the United States?" And she was like, "Yeah, yeah, let's do it." So she took me down to the recruiting office and signed up for me to join the military at 17, and which a lot of people don't realize you can do, but you can. And with a parent signature, joined the military. Called my dad, let him know I wasn't coming home, and he was pretty upset with me for about a year. Not only was I completely disobeying what he asked me not to do, but I also was a traitor to my country. So, the rest is history. Where did I leave off?
Your dad was not overly thrilled and with your decision there.
Yeah, so my dad, he was really upset with me for about a year, and I went to South Carolina. So I joined the military, went to boot camp, Fort Jackson, and joined the military. Yeah.
So within that part of the journey, I think something you mentioned earlier is really important, and that is, people have a desire for a sense of community, right? And whether that's your home, that's friends, that's work, we all have this desire for it. And so clearly that was something you were navigating and wanting. And I think one of the great things about, once again, whether it's a sports team or it's military, right, is you kind of have that instant sense of community because you're driving with people. At the same token, as a 17-year-old, I'm sure all of a sudden being in a disciplined, regimented world, that can be a little bit of a shock. So talk a little about, getting that sense of community, but then also being in a totally new environment.
I was so grateful for the military at that time in my life. I had gone from being pretty alone. I mean, I have 10 brothers and sisters, but we were never close. I was the second oldest. There was a huge age gap between me and the youngest. And so I grew up pretty much by myself and always alone, at school or, at work. I didn't have community.
Yeah.
And so joining the military was truly the first time that I had brothers and sisters in arms. We had a common goal, common purpose, common mission. We were all on the same even keel process and place and journey. And so that was a really beautiful experience for me. It gave me, definitely a sense of direction in life, gave me confidence, a North Star, something I was working towards, and a career. It taught me everything. And it also provided a way for me to go to college as well. So I got a scholarship. I was able to start, working on my undergrad, and I ultimately ended up getting my master's degree because of the military. They paid for it. So it was a really beautiful time to find myself, find community, find purpose. And I think that really is such a important aspect for everybody in life, is to find their community, no matter what that looks like. Doesn't of course have to be the military, but any type of community will do. Somebody that is around you, people that you can relate to, people that can support you and help put you on the right path.
I love it. Now, I think something you've probably recognized as you've gotten into the podcasting game and social media game is that I think sometimes community can be, truly people you can call, go spend time with one on one. But I think there's also this sense of, a new community that you can have today where I hear a lot of people talking about, the people I spend a lot of time with, they don't have the same goals or the same ambitions that I do. And I don't feel like I'm around the right type of people. And I think for that period of time when you're maybe transitioning a little bit of how you're spending your time or who you're spending it with, sometimes that community can be found, in a podcast or in social media because there are people that are pursuing those same things. So talk a little bit about that balancing act of, finding a community online, but then also, having that community physically present because there is something about being, face to face or, shoulder to shoulder with someone as well that we need.
Yeah, great question. And I'll also just maybe highlight a current example. I just went through a really big transformational journey of healing for myself. Coming out of the military, I came out of it with some childhood issues, some career issues I picked up over the course of my time in the military. So PTSD and anxiety, some other little things. And so I started going down this path of healing. And as I was going through that process, I took it very, very seriously. I cocooned myself. So I completely isolated myself and cut myself off from my old community and my old way of life because
Mm.
I realized that none of those things were serving me. I wasn't ultimately happy with my old community. And so I took like a big, massive stance to surround myself with just isolation for a couple of months. And during that time, I was researching, reading, listening to podcasts, attending conferences, watching YouTube videos with people like Joe Dispenza, Esther Hicks, Tony Robbins, you name it, like all of the motivational people,
Yeah.
listening to positive affirmations. I mean, just completely changing my life. And during that time, I was doing a lot of journaling. I changed my diet. So I stopped drinking caffeine, quit drinking alcohol, quit partying, quit going out to places that definitely I knew wasn't serving me. And when you go inward to that extreme, you're able to start identifying who you actually are, what
Mm.
you actually like. You're not now influenced by friends that maybe, I say quote unquote friends
Yeah,
that,
yeah.
are inviting you to parties that maybe you just go because you got invited, but it's not really your scene. So when you do this period of isolation, you're able to start actually recalibrating to who you actually are, what you actually like to do, what are you interested in yourself without the outside influence of other people. So doing that process was really important for me. And what I found through that process was I wasn't someone who liked to drink coffee all day long anyways. Like that wasn't serving me, right? It didn't make me
Yeah.
feel good. It exasperated my anxiety. I didn't like to drink alcohol because it made me depressed and that was making my mental health worse. I was someone who really enjoyed, I didn't know this before, but after my isolation, I realized I love going out into nature and taking beautiful walks with my dog and like going up in the mountains here in the Hollywood Hills and walking around and hanging out in nature. I love that. I never did it before. And I love Pilates. Who knew? Before I was like slinging weights around, but actually I prefer Pilates. So just when you do this isolation stuff and you just take a beat to do an audit, an independent audit, you then can start gravitating towards what is actually you. And through that process, you will naturally gravitate the new community that actually serves you the best. So now I'm part of these beautiful women's groups, which talked to me 6 months ago, a women's group would have been the last thing I wanted to do. But now I'm like hanging out with all these beautiful women all the time. And, we're having these like healing circles where we're doing journaling and we're sharing and we're doing like spa treatments. And we meet up and we have these beautiful sessions where we're doing like dance workshops and like whatever, like all these really cool things. It's always something new and different. But I've truly started to gravitate towards my actual community that serves me the best, and I've never been happier, which is the key. Um, you know, Again, before doing stuff that I was doing was just dragging me down, and I was not my true authentic self. But now I'm really my true authentic self, doing exactly what I want to do with exactly who I want to do it with, and I'm having so much fun. It's really great to do that work.
I love it. Well, and something I want to highlight that you mentioned, is you can find yourself saying yes to things that you don't even necessarily want to, but especially when you're like having this desire to feel accepted, to feel wanted. Well, to get an invite to something is exactly that acceptance. Even if it's not something I want to go do, it's like, well, I'm gonna say yes because that fills that need, right? That fills that void of acceptance that I haven't been feeling. So I think that's a really good point. And all of a sudden, to your point, you might wake up 5 years down the road and you go, I've been going to the gym 5 days a week because it made me feel accepted, but I don't even enjoy this. So if I could
Yeah.
fill the acceptance void in another way, I might actually find more fulfillment in the things I am doing.
Yeah, and I'll just also add one more little slice of nugget here for you. The other thing I found is I'm single, and I've been single for a long time, and I was totally attracting the wrong kind of guys into my life as well because I had never actually done the work to figure out who was I even looking for.
Mm.
And so during this calibration period, a good friend of mine suggested, why don't you just make a list? Like, what kind of guy are you looking for? Why don't you make a list? And I was like, to be honest, I have no idea. I couldn't sit here and even tell you what kind of attributes I'm looking for. Well, that's a problem because if
Yeah.
you don't even know who you are, you don't even know what you want, how can you get it? There's a great meme that runs around the internet where it's the scene from The Notebook where the guy is like, "What do you want?" And she's like, "I don't know." Well, that was me in life in general in every single category. And so I made a list. I made a huge fat list about who I'm looking for in a partner. And now I can confidently say I know what I want and I know what I don't want. That contrast is so important so you can start building the life that you truly want.
I love it. That's great. Great advice. Now, in your journey in the military, you end up being part of the U.S. military for 16 years. So, talk a little bit about, that journey for you. Because one, I think there's probably two elements that my head goes to. One, who you are at 17 and who you are at 33 are not the same person. But then also just the, sheer skills that one develops after being in the military for 16 years. So, talk a little bit about your journey in the military.
Yeah, it was definitely an adventure for sure. I was in the military prior to the combat arms being open to females, which opened up in 2016. So I had a really arduous path. I wanted to do all of the hardcore stuff, like, jump out of helicopters and if they would have let me drive a tank, I would have. Like I wanted to do all that kind of stuff. And they didn't let me. I was doing a lot of human resources. I was a recruiter for many years, but I did get to do some really cool stuff. I became a air assault qualified and a rappel master, which was really amazing. I was over in Afghanistan for a while. I did a trip to Germany and Kyrgyzstan, Kuwait, a few other little places that was a lot of adventure. But what was really difficult for my journey is it was such a sexist organization
Mm.
where, I definitely faced the moments where I had a chief tell me, I had to call around and when I became a recruiter and figure out who would take a girl at their office. And I'm like, wait, what? Are you kidding me right now? Like,
Yeah.
who would take a girl? Like, I'm not allowed to just walk into any position because I'm a girl.
Yeah.
And then being told no for 8 years in a row after I joined about going to air assault school. I always wanted to go. And every single time I would ask, I would get shut down. And I would ask why? Well, because you're a girl.
Mm.
And so, that was really hard for me to not be able to do something or try something or go to a training because of my gender.
Yeah.
That really impacted me pretty deeply, actually. And then on top of that, it's actually shocking how many people will just openly say women shouldn't be in combat arms, women shouldn't be in the military, women should be in the kitchen. Like they just openly say those kinds of things, and it's shocking because I've done it. I've been to war. I've been in combat arms fields and positions, and I did it well. I served my country very well. I did a great job, and so it's just devaluing. So I definitely struggled with a lot of that narrative, and it impacted my mental health. It impacted my self-worth, my confidence, right? Where you've got half the population telling you that you shouldn't be doing something.
Yeah.
It's pretty upsetting. But it was ultimately such a brilliant experience as well, where I found myself and I found my strength and my resilience and my confidence. And I was pushed to my absolute limits mentally, physically, and realized I could still keep going and I could go further. So it was so good for me in so many ways, especially going back to that 13-year-old girl, the first time she'd ever seen the military, to who I am now as a 35-year-old woman. I've really blossomed, and a large part of my life, 16 years, is attributed to the military. And, it just taught me so much. So I'm really grateful for it.
Absolutely. So, as you're working in the HR realm, because that's part of what you know, after leaving the military, Nike, as I understand it, had a great kind of like conversion process for post-military folks. And so you get tied in with Nike and are more in the corporate space of HR. So, talk a little bit about how you got started there and some of your experience with Nike.
Yeah, so Nike has a program called the Nike Military Veterans. It's an employee resource group, an ERG, and they have so many amazing people that work there in that program that do resume reviews, mock interviews. They help people find jobs, you name it. And it's going back to our conversation about community, it's a community of veterans that work at Nike. And veterans in general are really awesome people because they really like the whole concept of like never leave a fallen comrade, never leave your brother or sister in arms behind. That never leaves you as a human once you
Yeah.
go through the military. And so we really do take care of our own. And so that's such a beautiful program. So I found out about that program. I reached out to them, and I said, hey, I'm thinking about quitting active duty, and I'd love to get a civilian side job. And so I paired up with someone there. His name's Charles Leverton. He was on the board of NMV at the time. And he helped me get a job there at Nike, and the rest is history. So such a really interesting and cool place to land in Beaverton, Oregon at the Nike headquarters. It's a dream job for a lot of people. And it was a very awesome entryway into corporate world for me, which I've done now for, oh my gosh, almost 10 years since leaving the military active duty. So very, very cool experience. And I was at Nike just for a couple of years before transitioning to a different company, but definitely an amazing gateway into the world.
Yeah. Now, something I want to talk about and highlight from what you said there is I think so frequently when people will disqualify themselves from certain jobs or from certain things because they say, well, I don't check all those boxes. But really the issue is they don't see how their life experience does check all those boxes. And so for me, I played basketball in college. And when I would interview for a job, they'd be like, "Well, tell me about your work experience." It's like, "Well, I don't have a lot of that because I've been, dedicating my time to playing this sport. But let me tell you how I had to show leadership in basketball." And I think, from a military standpoint, you might say, well, what the heck do I know about running a company? Well, you might not know a whole lot about running a company per se, but you know how to lead people. And that's a really strong part of running a company. So talk about that for people, that are listening that say, gosh, I've really wanted to take a step into this different lane, but I don't have any actual experience there. But really, their life experience does parlay into it. They just need to figure out how to communicate that.
Oh my gosh, this is such a great topic. Great question too. So, I'll give you an example. In human resources, I see a lot of resumes. I've worked for some of the biggest companies in the world, so Nike, Amazon, Red Bull, Louis Vuitton, just to name a couple. And I've always been part of the human resources or talent acquisition functions for each of those entities. And so, what I can tell you is, I constantly would see resumes come through where someone's applying for a job, and when I look at their resume, especially if they were coming from the military, I'd see things like infantryman, excellent weapons marksmanship at M4s, and I could drive a tank, whatever it was, right? And I'm like, wow, I need to call this guy. And I would, if I saw one like that, I would call them, and not to necessarily give them an interview, but to give them feedback. Like, and some tough love. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure you can do this job that you're applying for. However, let's civilianize your
Right.
resume because weapons and tanks and all the warfare stuff, it's not going to fit into the corporate space, right?
Yeah.
And for sure, I believe that they could do, let's say the job was sales leader.
Yeah.
I absolutely believed 100% they could do the job, but I needed to give them the feedback to just their resume so I could sell it to everybody else. So
Yep.
I would call some of these people, and I mean, I actually still have these consultating conversations now where I'm helping people reformat their resumes. So instead, I would lead them to focus on things like their leadership skills, right? If you're an infantryman, you've definitely moved a unit of men from point A to point B, which
Yep.
is not just like walking from point A to point B.
Yep.
You've got to account for your equipment, so you're accountable, right? You've
Yep.
got to do a strategy plan of how you're going to get to point A to point B. So you can put strategy on there. Personnel. You can put all of the training and the analytics that you've done in terms of assessing what your plan of attack is and what your results were. How did it go? What was your after action review, right? You can start leveraging the tools and the skill sets that actually apply to the role that you're applying for and reformat your language, reformat your thinking, like walk through the actual steps. So I always encourage people when they look at a job description that they're applying for, have a Word or an adjustable, editable version of your resume on standby. Don't just have one PDF and think you only do it one time. Go to the job description, read it through. What are the keywords that stand out, and how did you do that work in your previous role? Really think through it and then adjust your resume to format it as so. But it doesn't matter if you were slinging bullets or you're slinging sales. You can probably do exactly the same thing. You just need to change your mindset a little bit around the language.
Yeah, that's great. Now, the other part that I'd be curious about, when you're hiring for really competitive roles, right? So as you mentioned, you're at top companies, and those are typically, to your point, destination jobs for a lot of people. I would imagine that there's an extra level of critiquing that goes on amongst a large corporation where they say, we really want to have the right person join the right role, right? Sometimes you just hire anyone because you need somebody and you don't have the clout that Nike does where you can be as selective. So talk a little bit about, someone that's in that process, they're interviewing for a job or they're thinking about making a career move. What are things that they can do to stand out or to separate themselves? One, maybe on the resume side, but two, we all know the resume doesn't get you a job. It may get your foot in the door, but when they're actually in the interview process.
Oh gosh, yeah, there's so many great tips. So resume, obviously, yes, get your resume exactly how you would want to format it for that particular job by looking at the job description. Go grab the job description that you applied for and reread it before you go into an interview and make sure you really understand the keywords and the buzzwords. Then I would also go to their website or any of their social media platforms. So that might be their LinkedIn, if they got an Instagram or a Facebook, go visit that. If they have a YouTube page, go check that out. Really get to understand what is the business doing. And then leverage the recruiter when you're talking to the recruiter and ask them questions like, what are some of the top initiatives for the company over the next 360 days, the next year, like what are they working on?
Yeah.
What is the immediate things that this person can do once they enter the company within the 30 to 60 days to make an impact right away? What's some low hanging fruit that, some wins that I can impact right away? So have some great questions lined up, basically propositioning yourself as a solution to their problem, right? The role is vacant. They need someone in the role. So how can you be the solution to the problem that they have? And then I would also like make sure you're on time, make sure you're on a laptop or a computer, which sounds like basic, but I'll tell you as a recruiter, the number of times I go into an interview and someone doesn't even realize it's like a video interview and they'll be like on their cell phone, or this is true. I've had so many people be in the car driving while they're having an interview call with me. And
Yep.
so it just comes across to me like they're not taking this seriously. They're not giving it the focus that they need. So make sure when you set an interview, you're at a place that's quiet, well lit, camera on, ready to interview, focused fully on the position. And be prepared with like a quick elevator pitch about yourself. They're going to ask you about you.
Yeah.
Be ready to walk through your resume skill set and pull out the things that are in the job description. So if the job description says, I'm looking for a salesperson with 3 years of experience, I'm looking for someone who's got HubSpot experience, and I need someone who is very analytical. Well, make sure your answers reflect the things that the job description is looking for. And then I would use active listening skills. So as the recruiter or the hiring manager, whoever you're interviewing with is talking, listen to what they're telling you and take notes. And then when you're responding to them, give the answer to how you're the solution to that again. So, oh, I heard you say that you're looking for someone who's able to have excellent follow-up skills with the sales leads that are coming through. I make sure to have a very organized process using a calendar system and a tool like Monday.com or ClickUp or something like that. So I never leave a ball dropped. And that'll tell them that you're trustworthy and things like that. So just be the solution to their problem is the overall theme.
I love it. Well, and some of the things, it's funny, you sit there and you go, I know this doesn't sound like a lot. And then at the same token, once you've done a bunch of interviews or you've met a bunch of people, you realize that that is unique sometimes, right? And one thing that I always like to encourage people to do is say thank you. And, writing a handwritten letter, thank you to somebody is one of the most unique things you can do. And yet takes what, 68 cents for a stamp, and it's very simple. But I can imagine there's not many people that actually receive a handwritten thank you for a job interview. And it's like, once again, that may not make you the best candidate, but it might make you stick out, and that's what matters.
Yeah, and because we're in such a digital world now, especially for some of the larger companies, I wouldn't necessarily recommend like a handwritten note for like a large company like a Louis Vuitton or a Nike. To be honest, the recruiter may never even get it because a lot of people work remotely or whatever. But I would absolutely champion your feedback to smaller companies or to even do like a email, just a simple email. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for the information. I really appreciate getting to know me. That goes a super, super long way. And the other tip I'll give you along that as well. Sometimes recruiters get so overwhelmed, and same with hiring managers. You reaching out and saying thank you reminds them, oh crap, I got to go back and get them in the process and we move them
Yeah.
to the next step or whatever. So that can be a good way to signal that you're still very much interested and curious. So don't be afraid to follow up, check in, do you have any feedback, et cetera. But yeah, I mean, definitely say thank you. It goes a huge, huge long way.
Yeah. Now, for you, as you kind of pivoted and you mentioned earlier amongst different companies, um, for you, would you say that the pivots were just you weren't finding the right fit for you? It wasn't the right company culture. You had an end goal in mind, and these were just, pieces of the pie to get to where you wanted to go? Or talk a little bit about, those pivots for you.
Yeah, so the transitions have been so interesting for me. They're all different. So when I left Nike, it was a huge 10,000 person layoff, 2017. So, those are unfortunate factors of the corporate world. You're going to go through periods of layoffs. So I've been laid off a couple of times in my career, but other things have been like I moved one time from uh, Portland to California during COVID. So that was one of the reasons why I made a change there. I just wanted to get some sunshine instead of all the rain in Portland. But yeah, it's usually been a strategic move. It's great if somebody can settle down in one company and stay for years, like I did. I was in the military for 16 years in a row, so that was obviously a huge part of my life. But corporate's a little bit different in the sense that you're lucky if you can get consistent career track for promotion.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to make moves. And I would also encourage any managers listening, any hiring people, CEOs of companies listening, like don't judge people for having transitions after 1 year or 2 years or 3 years, because it's the nature of the beast. Some people want to make a move to make more money,
Yep.
because obviously we need money. We're in a time where groceries are really expensive and we've got mouths to feed and things like that. So, people move to make more money sometimes, if they can't get a promotion or a raise at their current company. other people do it for strategic reasons. Like, I'm really experienced in this particular industry, but I'm trying to go more towards fashion or more towards government or whatever. And so I'd like to get more experience over here. So there can be moves that are very strategic as well. And I would just, if you see a resume you're interested in, but you're like, wow, this person's had a lot of jumps, ask them why, because you may actually be more impressed with the reasons why they've moved than than having them stay in one spot and being stagnant.
I like it. That's great. Now, did I understand correctly impact theory for some time?
Yeah. So I was at Impact Theory for about the last, oh gosh, almost 2 years. Yeah, I just recently left them. They had a big layoff too, unfortunately. But yeah, I was there for a couple of years.
Now, within that, the organization that is Impact Theory, I mean, they're kind of putting their hands in a lot of different areas. And so as you're, working that element of HR, how do you pick the lane that you're going to be driving in, or what's kind of the parameters in which you're operating?
How did I pick the role that I was in?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I had been in human resources my whole career, and so it was really natural. They had a head of human resources position open, and so it was all my favorite things at once. So obviously, I'm really involved in the podcasting and YouTube space, and so working for an organization that also is heavily focused on YouTube and podcasting. They make video games, they have comic books, and Impact Theory University, their student-based subscriber content. That was really amazing to get to work there and do all of the things I love at once, and manage their human resources and their talent acquisition function. It was incredible.
Yeah. Now, talk a little bit about your podcast, and just a little bit of the inspiration behind getting it started and what that looks like today.
Yeah, so I started my Q&A show, which it originally started off as a show focused on military transition, so helping military service members transition from military to civilian life. And that can be a really big, scary thing. It definitely was for me, because you're leaving a safety net. That when you're in the military, your whole ecosystem is taken care of. What you're going to wear, what you're going to eat, where you're going to be, what you're going to train, what you're going to work on, it's all done for you. And so leaving that, going from 17, to I was 33 when I got out, 17 to 33. And it was really scary to make the decision to depart. And so, doing that and doing it successfully, I wanted to help other people do it as well, but also take care of myself. I was working through some mental health stuff, and having the interviews I was having was a really cool way to learn from experts and industry leaders, to help make my own transition a little bit smoother. And then, gosh, probably about 3, 4 months ago now, I went through this really beautiful plant medicine healing retreat with other military veterans. And it changed my life so dramatically, so in such a positive, beautiful way, that my show pivoted towards being fully focused on mental health, plant medicine, spirituality, the mind, and exploring all of the different healing modalities that exist for those struggling with mental health issues. And so now that's the full focus of my show. And it's really been so beautiful to learn from shamans, facilitators, healers, therapists, psychotherapists, experts that have worked with the top military elite in the world, et cetera. So that's the show now, and it's new. So definitely encourage everyone to go check it out. But it's been a really beautiful ride.
Now, I think oftentimes, who we are and the experiences we've had prepare us to be the best mentor to our previous selves. The hard part about that is we have to be able to work through our own things before we can really help others, right? At least we don't have to be fully worked through it, right? But we have to be in process to be able to, be a good piece of feedback. So talk a little bit about that for your experience. Once again, you talked about, hey, I've done a lot of work on myself, and now feeling, I would say, confident and equipped to help other people work through theirs.
Yeah, it's definitely a scary thing to speak on a topic that, that's where your whole complex of imposter syndrome comes in, where you start having that negative self-talk and that doubt of, I'm qualified to talk about this, or I
Right.
should talk about this. But I thought, what a cool thing to do to be vulnerable. Because on my show, I'm very clear, like I am not healed all the way. I'm still working on it. This is a lifelong thing. It's a journey, it's a process. So I lead with vulnerability and I lead with my heart in that, I'm just being real, I'm being transparent. I'm talking very publicly, which is kind of scary, about my mental health issues and my struggles and my issues transitioning from military to civilian life, but also the baggage that I brought with me, and unpacking it in front of the world by doing my podcast. It's kind of scary. But the really beautiful thing is I'm not only helping myself by doing that, I'm also helping other people, because as you probably know, mental health was kept in a box for so long, under the bed, locked behind a door. Nobody wanted to talk about it. If you dared talk about it, you may risk your career, your relationships, your reputation, you name it. And I'm actively, aggressively disputing that line of thinking and saying, no, we should be supporting each other, championing each other, providing resources, tools, modalities of healing. So as I go through this exploration and unpacking that box publicly the way that I am, I'm testing out all of these different healing modalities and talking about them online, because I want people to find healing in ways that are not commonly available today. Because as I went through my own healing journey, I tried all the Western modalities. So that's talk therapy. I tried SSRI medications, prescriptions. I tried sleep medications. I tried the VA system. Nothing worked for me. And so I really started to go down this path of unique modalities to find something that would work so I could have hope again. And I did. I found things that were actually making a change and moving the needle on trauma. And so doing that work and putting it on a platform like YouTube or on a podcast, so many other people now, I'm getting messages nonstop about people telling me that they're trying these modalities that I'm offering to them as ideas, and it's actually changing their lives. So I know we're saving lives by the work that we're doing, because we're stopping people from feeling like there's no hope. And we're really helping to bridge the gap for people to heal by this work. So it's been really, really cool.
I love that. Now, you had mentioned, just kind of the idea behind imposter syndrome. And I think at the end of the day, everyone has felt that at some point. And I think sometimes people feel like I need to get to a spot where I won't feel that anymore. It's like, well, that probably doesn't ever go away. It's just more so when the thought comes into your mind, you act regardless of having the thought. So talk a bit about working through that, and not necessarily saying, all right, I'm never going to have that thought again, but more, I'm catching that thought and I'm realizing I'm having the thought and I can take action nonetheless.
Yeah, I'll give you, actually, we can just use my podcast as an example. I wanted to have a podcast for 5 years.
Yeah.
Literally during COVID, before COVID, I bought all the equipment. I bought microphones, booms, lights, everything, and it sat in a box for 5 years. I never did anything with it. I paid all that money for all that equipment and didn't do anything with it. I was so scared. I didn't know what I was going to talk about. I didn't think anyone was going to care, or anyone was going to watch, or anyone was going to listen, right? Like, I just got in my own head. I was my own worst enemy. And this is where our minds can make or break us, right? There's a famous saying, if you believe you can do it, you will. If you believe you can't do it, you won't.
Yeah.
And it's basically anything that you put your mind to, as they say, becomes reality. And so I had a really good friend of mine who's really successful on YouTube. I mean, 6 million subscribers. His social medias are all multi-millions of followers. And I was having a conversation with him one day. I was like, I really want to have a podcast, but I'm just like terrified. I don't even know how to get started. I don't know what to do. And he was like, Amy, it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be done. And so knowing that, I didn't have to have everything perfect and just give it a shot. I acted on his advice and I just jumped in. So I knew that as I was getting into it, my show wasn't going to be perfect. I wasn't going to be the perfect host. I was going to make mistakes. In fact, there's an episode I did not too long ago where I was interviewing this a British soldier that was part of the SBS, and he's really highly well regarded. And he's on TV, and he's got a book, and hangs out with Prince Harry. And I said the Royal Army on our podcast, and I was so embarrassed because it's not called the Royal Army; it's called the British Army. But I messed up. I made a mistake, and I felt so terrible about it. People called me out and put comments on the video and made fun of me. But the thing is, like, it's okay to make mistakes, because every single time I do an episode, I get better. I go back and I look at that episode. I'm like, oh man, the lighting should have been like this. The audio needs to be like this. I need to be more prepared in the questions. I need to research better, right? So we're always going to be continuing to get better and better and better and better and better. And it truly will never get done if you seek for perfection. And so I just share that advice that it doesn't matter what you want to do. If you want to be a race car driver, if you want to be a basketball player, if you want to be an expert yoga instructor, you're not going to be perfect right away. You just need to get started because you're going to look back, a year from now, 2 years from now, and you're going to be like, holy crap, here I am leading a class of 60 students as an expert yoga instructor. 2 years ago, I was literally sitting in my living room with the dream of it. And so I would just encourage you, don't sit in the loop of trying to be perfect and just get started. And here I am, I've got almost 20 episodes now of my podcast, which was my dream 5 years ago.
Yeah.
My dream. So it's not perfect, but it's getting started.
I love that. Well, I think the two things I would highlight from that is one, we're all a work in progress, right? Any aspect of life, we're consistently a work in progress. But I think the second part is, it's fun to be like, man, I feel good about where I'm at, and then reflect on something a year later and be like, I can't believe I thought that was good, right? Like, hey, appreciate where you're at in that moment and say, this is the best I could do at this moment in time, knowing that, yeah, hopefully a year from now, I don't think this is the best I could be, right? Hopefully a year from now, I'm better than I was today, but just having the confidence and I am taking action, I'm doing what I said I was going to do, and allow that to grow your confidence.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And I'll tell you, like if you look at some of the greatest greats of the world today, Ariana Grande, if you're into makeup tutorials, Nikki tutorials, like you just go look at who's the guy that was just boxing recently? Oh my gosh, what's
Oh,
his name?
Jake Paul.
Jake Paul. Go look at Jake Paul and Logan Paul's content on YouTube from 10 years ago. Go look at Justin Bieber's first video he posted on YouTube when he started singing, right? If you go all the way back in time to where the biggest names in all of the industries across the board got started, they all started at the bottom. And where you are right now, if you're listening to this right now and you're like, oh my gosh, I want to be, a famous singer, and you have no singing experience, that was them. That was them 10 years ago before they got started. And so, it's really interesting to see these people post remembrance reels of their old content. Nikki Tutorials is a great example. She just posted one on her page where she posted the first time she ever did a makeup tutorial, and it was terrible lighting. The makeup did not look good, right? But she still posted it anyway. She was vulnerable and brave enough to post it anyway. And she's gotten better and better and better, better, better over the years. And now she's got billions of views. She's one of the most top paid tutorial content creators for makeup artistry in the world. Her makeup is selling in Sephora and Ulta. You know what I mean? So it's just like, keep going. Just get the ball started.
I love it. Well, Amy, I want to say thanks so much for sharing your journey and just the incredible trek it's been thus far, but excited to continue to watch your journey and see all the amazing things that you're going to do.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.